Welcome back to Jacques in the Garden. Another beautiful day here in sunny San Diego in November. And today is a special day because we are going to be harvesting the very first of our fall crops. And that is going to be 2, maybe more, beautiful heads of broccoli, as well as a bunch of other smaller items. Now, the other thing I'm going to be working on today is actually prepping the entire area I plan on planting garlic in. It is a pretty big chunk of land and we do need to do some work to the soil. But the first thing I want to do here today is actually finally deal with this bed over here, which has my mustard cover crop. Before we get into the process of doing this, I did want to give you a quick breakdown on what it is and why I am growing it. This is a variety of mustard called Pacific Gold Mighty Mustard. It is actually so mustardy that it smells disgusting. You would never want to eat this. In fact, I recommend that you don't eat it because it has too many of those glucosinates, the mustard compounds. It would probably wreck your stomach. And actually the reason why I'm growing this specific variety is for that reason. It has so many of these glucosinates that if you chop this up really finely and incorporate it into your soil where it then will break down, what happens is all those compounds release and they act like mustard gas and they kill the 2 prevalent problems in my garden, which are fungal diseases and root knot nematodes. In fact, it does so well at killing both of those problems that it is in some cases stronger than the commercial stuff that we aren't even allowed to buy as home gardeners. So it's organic, it's something that doesn't require chemicals, and it works in the specific location you put it in, and that's it. So it's perfect for the home gardener. The only downside is that it takes time to grow and it takes time to break down. So in the past, what I've done is I've chopped it up, sort of finely layered it on the surface, and then just tried to bury it in with compost. But that doesn't work as well as I thought it does. Instead, you should really work it into the soil deeper down as deep as you can, really, to help solve some of those issues that reside deeper in the soil than just that very top layer. So what we're going to be doing differently today is that first I'm going to come around and chop it using these shears into roughly just above the ground essentially. And then at that point, I'm gonna come through with a lawnmower to get it as beat up and fine as possible before we chop it into the soil. But before we do any of that, I do need to pull all the mulch back away from this bed, because if I'm going to be running a lawnmower, I don't want to chop wood chips that are becoming projectiles and also then working into the soil, which is just going to weaken the plants in the future. The other thing is that we need to remove the irrigation line, which luckily I did lay down without any staples because I knew I was going to be doing this. Now there's one more thing I need to mention, which is when do you do this process? Well, you do it as soon as you see flowers. I've been removing the flowers as I see them because I don't want them to spread seed, but there are flowers appearing across this whole mustard cover crop, so it is the perfect time to do it. Now the other thing I want to mention is that this has become infested with a stink bug that has been also going onto my other brassica plants. So I'm hoping that if I delete this patch, it'll also delete a lot of those stink bugs. I'll show you what those look like. I see literally like 20 of them right there. So I cannot wait to get the lawnmower into this area. And so now, just like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is chop all of this up, and then we'll get it really chopped up with that lawnmower. So now what we have is very pre-chopped mustard greens, but we need it much, much finer. So I'm gonna go grab the lawnmower, which, by the way, in the past, I kind of besmirched because a lot of people said I could just easily do this kind of job with a lawnmower. I do enjoy the physical work of chopping things by hand, but in this case, I just want it as fine as possible. So what I did is I found a random lawnmower on OfferUp, paid like 40 bucks for it. The person clearly didn't need it anymore. And all I've been using it for is chopping up plants that I either want to put into a compost bin, or situations like this, or to deal with the annoying Bermuda grass that's been growing on my stupid strip out on the main street. I gotta say, I never thought I would need a lawnmower as a gardener, but it's come in as a very handy tool. So let me go grab that and we'll chop this whole area up. I honestly don't understand what just happened. All of that plant matter has seemingly vanished. All I did is run the mower on it, and now I can't even tell if it's still here or not, but it is. It couldn't have literally evaporated. I did not have a bag on it. I cleaned out the bottom. So I guess this is all the material that's left over once you run it over with a mower a bunch of times. I guess it's mostly now mustard juice, which is fine, because now what I'm going to do is get a broad fork. We're gonna break up this soil a bunch to help open it up and get some of that mustard deeper down. So you can see I did a couple extra things here. Added the shrimp meal, which is like crab meal. It has a lot of chitin, which is supposed to help reduce nematode populations. It's also full of nitrogen, so it should heat this up and break down everything even faster. I also added compost to add a little bit more organic matter and to make sure I smothered everything that I added to the bed. And finally, I decided to throw on this burlap to again help it break down faster. The idea is to help heat up this as much as possible, trap that heat, and really get that breakdown process going. Final thing is, of course, is moving the mulch back, but I'll probably add a fresh layer. The nice thing about the burlap is it also helps keep this mulch out of the bed. So now all I have to do is let this sit here for at least 2 weeks. I basically want to come in here, dig into it, and find no evidence of plant bits left over. So at least 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks, maybe even up to 4, but that's it for this part of this project. Now let's go harvest some delicious vegetables. I have a lot of broccoli and also a lot of salad greens, including a whole lot of arugula right here and a whole bunch of lettuce back there. Oh, it feels good to flip a garden bed, and now I want to sit back and take a little break while I tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Bombas, which makes these wonderful Sunday slippers that I'm wearing right now that have the Sherpa on the outside and on the inside, which ensures that my feet are always going to be warm and cozy. But my favorite thing about them is that compared to a lot of other slippers I've had, the hard rubber sole on the bottom means that I am never going to be picking up random debris from the garden and tracking it indoors. So they've quickly become my favorite indoor and outdoor shoe, especially when I need to just grab something from the garden real quick. But if you want something a little bit more snug fitting, you could get their gripper slipper, which is basically a sock slipper hybrid that you could also just throw in the wash whenever it gets dirty. And they also have the classic slide-on nest, which is great for just covering your toes up and keeping them warm and cozy as you go from room to room and snuggle under the blanket. But the really cool thing about Bombas is that they are a purpose-driven company. They've donated over 150 million articles of clothing to those in need. And the good thing is that they make the top 3 most requested items, including socks, which I'm wearing, underwear, which I'm wearing, and also t-shirts. And all of those items get donated whenever you make a purchase through them. So thank you to Bombas for sponsoring this video. And also, if you use the code Jacques, you get 20% off your first purchase. And you can also help donate some clothing to those in need. So now, I think the break's over. I get my regular shoes back on and we'll head out to the garden and do some harvesting. So now we're over here in the North Garden where I have some harvests that are definitely ready. Now over here, this 4x8 bed is full of broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower. And none of that is ready, but it is getting quite close to starting to produce those main heads. But over here in this 4x4 tall, epic raised bed, we do have a harvest that's ready. It is a big, beautiful, perfect head of broccoli. Not just one, there's one right here. There's another right there that I think is also ready to harvest. And there's a third one behind here that is maybe just a couple days out. Now there is also a couple bonus harvests inside this bed, so let's get in a little closer. I'll show you what to look for when harvesting your broccoli and what else we're pulling from this bed. So here is the broccoli that is absolutely stunning and perfect. Not only that, but the plant itself looks really good, I have to say. Now there's a couple things I'm looking at here to determine whether it's ready. First of all, it's starting to loosen a little bit around where the florets actually meet up with each other, and that is a telltale sign that it is starting to want to flower and it is ready to harvest. The other thing I'm seeing is that there's already side shoot production. So I have baby little broccolis here already starting to form, and I don't want to miss this main head of broccoli. Now the side shoots of broccoli, in my opinion, are the best because they are very frequent. You get a lot of them. They're already pre-floreted. You don't have to separate the crown, but the main head is of course the main prize. So let's go ahead. I'm going to cut it so that I leave plenty of leaves to get more side shoot production. And wow, this is a thick stem. Can't even finish it in a single cut. So here it is up close. It is so beautiful, so perfect. No aphid damage or anything like that. There's a crack in the stem there, but that's nothing bad. And in fact, I have to say, this might be one of the most picturesque, beautiful heads of broccoli that I've harvested from my garden. So now let me show you the second one and we'll see if that guy is ready as well. So here is head number 2. You can see it has similar things going on. The floret is loosening in some areas. You're starting to see separation between where the florets meet. So for me, this is an ideal stage to harvest at. Yes, it could get bigger, but also it could loosen more. It could get closer to flowering. And at that point, it's not going to be as good. So I'd much rather just guarantee I get a good harvest rather than trying to maximize that last like 10% or so. So here's what we've got. Similar size head. Again, absolutely beautiful head of broccoli here. Cannot believe how wonderful this is. For only 6 weeks, an early fall harvest of broccoli is something I'm definitely not mad about. Again, no aphid damage. Does have that core in the center here, but that stops right about here where the florets start to actually separate. So there's no loss in actual crop here. And also, just so you know, you can eat the leaves. They actually saute and roast up really beautifully. But in this case, I'm not harvesting the whole plant. I'm leaving it for side shoot production. So we're going to leave it just like this, and it'll continue to produce little side shoots of broccoli. Now let me show you one that I know for sure is not ready, so you can see what that looks like. So here's a perfect example of a broccoli that I would say is not yet mature. There's a couple things that we're looking at here. First of all, the color, it is light green to almost yellow in some spots, which is a sign that it's still growing. You can also see that some of these florets are like little grains of sand. They haven't really become that kind of more bulbous head that you see on the more mature broccoli. And there's still tons of gappage, and it's not just gappage, but it's like ununiform surface. It should look more like a proper mound instead of like a bunch of little mounds stuck together. So now let's compare it to the one that is mature that we harvested first. You could see the size difference is quite dramatic. It's very obviously much bigger. At this point, I'd say it's maybe even 4 times the mass, maybe even more than this guy over here. And here's what I mean by those florets. You could see that they're tight buds that haven't opened yet, whereas this one still is at that very, very pinprick level. The other thing you'll see is the color. It becomes a little bit more blue-green. That is a little bit variety dependent, but in this case, you could see just how dramatic the difference is between a young one and one that is ready to harvest. Now, why did this one not mature as early? Well, that's because it's on the back half of the bed and it gets a lot more shade. So that is the difference, that sun gives you a much faster season. This is ready in 6 weeks. This one might be ready in something like 9 weeks. So that's what it looks like for broccoli. This is a perfect one. This one's still going. Now you know. Now there is another harvest hiding inside this bed, and it's actually the prime time to collect it now because these plants are so mature. They've got these giant leaves. They're casting shadows all throughout this garden bed, and there's really no point in leaving this lettuce to grow for any longer. So what I did here is I planted this lettuce right in between all of my broccoli plants with the express knowledge of knowing that I would be harvesting it right now. And there we go. We've got a beautiful head of, I believe this was Nevada lettuce, which is like a crispy style head of lettuce, somewhere in between like romaine and butter lettuce. It's got that nice ruffly texture, but it's still very crisp and delicious. So we got one head right there. And let's see how many more I have in here. Got another one right here. Another nice, beautiful head of lettuce. We're gonna definitely be having salad for dinner tonight. And then I've got one more right up front and center here. Now, a lot of times you'll have these kind of gross leaves on the outside of lettuce, and that's totally fine to just remove, put that in your compost bin, and the rest of this is going to make for a tasty, crispy lettuce. Now, what we've done here is we've opened up a ton of space on the inside middle of the bed. And honestly, at this point, I probably won't put anything else in here because it's just gonna get shaded out by the broccoli anyway. So that's it for the harvest out of this particular garden bed, but I wanna show you an update on the bed in the 4x8 and also the one in the big no-dig bed that I covered in netting before we go harvest the arugula. Now, if you're in a mild climate, you might get to experience something like this where you could have broccoli, lettuce, harvested at the same time that you come out to your garden and harvest some nice, beautiful cornito peppers, or actually this one might be, I'm blanking on the variety name, Cubanelle pepper, a beautiful frying pepper. And also you could come out to the garden and get the last of your summer eggplants. Now these beautiful India eggplants are still cranking. Even though we are deep into fall, there's actually, oh boy, there's a whole bunch of other eggplant back there. Let me grab some of that. So we've got 3 eggplant right here, the other 3 that I harvested moments ago. There's a whole nother bed of eggplant in my hugelkultur, but just wanted to point out that if you do live in a mild climate, you could definitely pull this kind of harvest out. All you have to do is make sure you get your timing right. So if you do want to harvest a fall garden in the next year and you live somewhere that is like zone 9 or up, maybe even 8 up, definitely make sure that you get your timing right on planting your fall garden. That is why I've been harping about it so much. If I waited to plant my fall garden in, let's say, October, I would not be harvesting this broccoli today. There simply would not be enough sunlight hours, but getting it in the ground in September while it's still summer is the only way you could pull off a true fall harvest, and otherwise you're just waiting until the winter. So that's enough eggplant and harvest talk for this moment. Let's go ahead and pop over to this bed over here, and you'll see what a true fall winter garden bed looks like. Now this is a classic fall bed. What I have next to me, of course, is some lacinato kale, and then in this bed up front we have the cabbages, in the middle is cauliflower, and in the back row is the broccoli. Now why did I plant it like that? Well, it's because the broccoli was the most mature seedling at the time, so it was the biggest. I didn't want to put it up front where it would shade the plants behind it. But not only that, the broccoli one is the only one that's going to be harvested multiple times. So if I put it up front and let it get really massive and then came back to harvest the side shoots of broccoli, well, it would be about this big, and anything I planted behind it would be doomed to just die by not getting enough sun. Now instead, what I've done is I put the harvests that are multiple times in the very back row to allow them to get big. And then what will happen is that when these cabbages are ready, the plant will get fully removed. When the cauliflower is ready, it will get harvested and fully removed. I'll have a bunch of mature side shoot producing broccoli in the back. And this whole front section, or front 2/3 of this bed, will be totally free to be replanted with something else, like maybe a early spring harvest of more brassicas, or I could put something like carrots or whatever it is you want to grow. But that is just something to think about when you are planting your bed, is what is the order of the harvest and where does the sun actually shine, and use that to your advantage to get the most out of your garden beds. That's exactly what I did here. And I have to say, it's looking and working just as expected. So here's another bed that was planted pretty early, not as early as those other guys. This was planted, I believe, in the first week of October or so, and I put bird netting over it to protect it from cabbage looper moths, which actually, spoiler alert, it does not block them, but it does block other digging pests and birds from getting into the side of the garden. So now the plants are quite mature. You can see the leaves are pressing up against the netting. So first what I want to do is remove all the netting, and then I'll show you how this whole layout worked out. This bed is actually very similar to the previous one. I have burgundy broccoli on the back here. It is a multi-branching broccoli that produces tons and tons of florets. So again, I wanted it on the back side of the sun because the sun goes like this. You can see it's shining right into my eyes right now as it's starting to set on the horizon. But I did notice something weird in here, which is that is that a tomato plant? Yeah, we're not growing any tomatoes right now outside in the middle of fall. It is way too late for that. Nematode check, and of course there are nematodes. So the nematodes continue to plague me here in the garden. I'm running out of words for some reason. But overall, again, this bed does look quite nice. The broccoli is really big. The flowers are really starting to grow in. I have a couple blooms of zinnias coming in. This guy is about to send up its first bloom on the zinnia there as well. And there are snapdragons and nasturtiums all throughout this bed. So again, I think it looks quite nice. I think we'll have a lot of massive harvest out of here. The only thing that's limiting this bed the most is that it gets shadowed earlier because the house here actually casts a pretty good shadow in the winter time. But luckily we planted early enough that these plants had a chance to mature. And that is all it is when it comes to fall and winter gardening. It's getting your stuff in the ground early enough that it gets enough sun to actually size up to a mature level where it could start to finally produce food that you get to eat. So this bed, nothing to do here except wait. So now let's go ahead back to the original garden and we'll check out that arugula. So we're back here at the scene of the crime where we just fixed up that mustard cover crop bed. And now we're taking a look at this arugula, which I am also seeing the stink bugs on. But the other thing I'm noticing is that it is starting to bolt. So in the previous video, I mentioned I was gone from the garden for over 2 weeks. And in that time period, parts of the garden were growing very, very vigorously. And one of those parts was this arugula patch. Now it has produced really well, probably the best arugula I've ever grown. But now that it's starting to bolt and it is covered in pests, I want to do a taste test before I actually harvest and commit to eating this for dinner. So let's check it out. Woo, that is spicy. I think at this point, we're not going to be consuming this. Whew, that is not good. Instead, let's go ahead and remove it and put it in the compost pile. But there is some beautiful stuff behind it. So we'll take a closer look at that once we get this arugula out of the way. I don't know why I keep getting surprised by how small stuff becomes once you chop it up. It is the basic principle of surface area essentially. And that's what we've done here. We've chopped up all that arugula, jammed it into this little tub here. All of this is going straight into the compost bin where all this fresh green material will be greatly appreciated and will definitely heat it up quickly. Now, the other thing I did is I went through and I picked off the lower leaves from this lacinato kale just to keep it fresh and clean and give it some more airflow. Tends to get a little bit of powdery mildew even in this time of year if it is choked out from any amount of airflow. And obviously that arugula created essentially a blanket around all these plants. Same with this calendula right behind me. I stripped off some of the lower leaves that appear to have some powdery mildew, but the upper stuff looks great. So that is probably all it needed. Now, what am I going to do with this freed up space in my garden bed now? Well, same sort of problem that I was describing earlier. The sun goes like this and the shadows get cast this way. So whatever I plant here should be something either tall already or something that can tolerate a bit of shade. A couple options I could think of is more salad greens, whether it's arugula or lettuce or anything like that, maybe even some more choys. I have a couple choys hiding down here. Those can actually handle a little bit more shade. Or you could even go through the route of adding some beets or carrots that will take a long time to grow. I'm talking if I plant them now, I won't be harvesting them until late winter, and that'll give them plenty of time to grow even with spotty sunlight. But that is all we're going to do today. I did want to get to the garlic bed prep area, but I forgot that the sun sets pretty early now, and daylight savings didn't help either. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys learned some things along the way. I've got this to move to the compost. I've got a wonderful basket of produce to bring inside. And it looks like we're having broccoli and salad. I don't know if we're gonna have eggplant tonight though. I don't know, something about broccoli and eggplant together doesn't make sense in my head, but we'll see. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.